Hello everyone, welcome to the video, like you didn't know you clicked on it already. This is my first ever Legends of Runeterra patch rundown. Apparently I just play all the Riot games and this is the latest one. This is the essentially second preview patch. It's got a bunch of card updates. Expeditions is coming out, which is super hype. If you were already in the first preview patch, you're going to be in this one. They're going to add more people to this preview patch, so hopefully, spamming the "let me in" meme works for you. I'm hopeful. Good luck. So new game mode, which we'll cover in a second, and a lot of card updates. I think it's a really cool update. I think there's a lot of very good changes. There's going to be cards that I'll miss, and let's get into it. Okay, so the first things first, Expeditions is coming out. Expeditions is a limited draft mode, so you're going to draft a 30 to 36 card deck. You can kind of see here in this thumbnail, at various points the game offers you the ability to trade a card for a different card. You get 3 offerings. You can go tri-region theoretically, somewhat rarely, but it can happen. You can go mono-region sometimes, and ultimately you're drafting a deck together, right? So that's super cool. It's very fun. I really enjoy the mode. Absolutely cool stuff. Pacey Time and I are putting out a thing pretty soon that goes into this a bit more in depth as well, so stay tuned for that. Overall, though, gotta say, cool mode, fun to play. If you are new to card games, you don't know what the point of a limited game mode is. It lets you play on equal footing if you don't own any cards, because you're all drafting from the same ubiquitous pool anyway. So if you're late to the game, or you're late to, if you haven't played very much and so you don't have a lot of progression yet, you're back on equal footing. There's really good rewards, I think, for this mode, especially if you win. It's cool stuff. Recommend you check it out. It's awesome. Definitely worth playing. And they have a sort of disclaimer on card updates. They're going to talk about, their goals with this. You should not expect this number of changes at once to be normal, but LOR is still in active development, right? We're in preview patches. Only some people can get in. Like, on their timeline, the official closed beta is later. It's next year, so hey, they're still doing some bug fixes, they're still doing polish, there's several card reworks, like they're essentially an entirely new card. So that's going on there. But they do want to do some balancing, right? I think they said like roughly once a month maybe they do balance updates when it went live, so we'll see. But they have some extra bullet points like, hey, every champ should have a deck where they fit really, really well. Non-champ cards should have a deck where they're a good option. Regions that have at least one completely viable deck. The meta should support, a lot of options, of course, because, duh. So, okay, cool. Like, if Ionia ends up being really bad, they'll buff Ionia, next month or something like that. If a champion's unplayable, they'll buff the champion or rework it or something. So, okay, cool stuff. Those are great. And then they're going to say, hey, what we're changing, what we're keeping an eye on that we're not sure is worth doing, and what they're intentionally not changing, even though people are asking about it. Okay, so let's go into the actual changes. The first up is the champion mini rework with Lux. Okay, so Lux, basically the level 1 version. So Lux costs 1 more mana, and she loses 2 attack and gains 1 health. Okay, so she's tankier. So this means that she won't die to, say, like a Fiora challenge. It means she won't die to Black Spear or Grasp of the Undying. So there's actually a lot of ways to get exactly 3 damage, interestingly, in this game. So that's actually pretty meaningful. Costs 1 more mana, and the big thing is her level up condition no longer requires you to cast it within the same round, as long as you cast 6 overall. And that's actually a really big deal. That's something that I found myself, I didn't mind playing around it. It was certainly skillful, but the idea of, well, I've got 6 mana worth of spells in hand, and I only have 4 mana right now, and I'd really like to remove that Ezreal, but I guess I should wait around and cast my spells afterwards. Ultimately, this makes Lux a much more reliable level up, and that's fine. Level 2 version of Lux, instead of getting Final Spark when you attack, you gain Final Spark when you, again, spend 6 mana within a round. Actually, it's not even within a round. When I've seen you spend 6 mana on spells, create a Final Spark. So this will keep ticking over and over. So you can like, level her up, spend 5 mana, go into the next round, spend 1 mana. Unless this is a typo, this should allow you to sort of prepare Final Spark and then cast it for like 1 mana on like a later round. Also worth noting out, right? Final Spark is now free, because instead of just getting generated by attacking, it's generated by spending mana on spells. So you make a Final Spark, and then it's free. It's slow instead of fast, it's 4 damage instead of 6, but you don't have to swing with Lux to put this out, which keeps her a lot safer. Again, she has more health, yeah, she's more expensive, but ultimately I'm going to say that overall this ends up, I would say, making Lux more playable. It was actually very, very difficult to, like, manage your curve well enough that, like, you would summon her on 5, which means you don't have mana to level her up, so then on 6, you're just casting spells, you might level her up, but you don't want to use her to fight because she's like only a 6/4, even that leveled up, which means, you know, around round 6 or 7, she's probably dying to anything on the board, and then you go into round 7, then you swing with her, then you have, and it's like, it was just too hard to use her, ultimately. That's what I felt. So, she's a bit more late game, but you can get more final sparks in a round. It's actually more mana efficient, so I think that's generally going to be pretty positive. Next up, Garen, -1 cost, -1 attack and health. Okay, basically you drop them down on the board sooner. If you're curving out better than your opponents, and your opponent can't deal with a 5/5 regen, you're in a really, really, really good spot. Because if they chump block it, okay, the unit dies, then Garen goes back to full HP. It should trade really well with almost everything that anyone can play. Phreak has a 5/6, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But also in Demacia, you have a lot of pretty cheap combat tricks. You have the 3 mana barrier, the 1 mana +1/+1, so pretty easy to get Garen some value. And I think he's just generally quite good in fairly aggro decks. The level 2 version, right, readies your attack start of the round. And the fact that this comes online a round sooner can definitely be really, really valuable. So a more aggressive sort of early game tuning definitely helps you get him online and start getting the free attacks a bit sooner, so that can be kind of cool. Also worth noting is that this ends up kind of reshaping, like if you were on the play on round 1, Garen was really good at 6, because you'd play him on 6, defend once, go into 7, swing, level up, go into round 8, and your attack's ready. So here, if you're play on round 1, you swing with Garen, you hit on round 5, you swing with Garen, you hit on round 6, he levels up, you go to round 7, where it's your attack anyway, and he readies your attack, which you already have. So Garen is better kept, is better used if you are now the second to play, for what that's worth. Unless you can, like, do some of the direct challenge stuff that makes it work pretty well. That's also possible, of course. Really important change, nerfing Draven. In general, a good rule of thumb for looking at card balance is essentially if the cost equals the average of the attack and health, that's okay-ish. It's like, fine, I guess, but what you're really looking for is something slightly above that. So, for example, 3/3 quick attack for 3 is good on as a vanilla test. If this has no other sort of text on the card, it's not a champion that levels up, doesn't do anything kind of special when it comes into play. It's just 3/3 plus a minor buff like quick attack. It's a good 3-drop. So this was 4/3 quick attack for 3, which means it was definitely overstated, definitely overpowered. This is still what I consider a good card. 3/3 quick attack for 3 is good. It's like completely playable, but he also makes a spinning action, means he can be a 4/3, or he can level up and suddenly become, a 4/4. He used to be a 5/4. This is now increasing value. Draven is still very good, very much worth playing. I want to point out he gains overwhelm when he levels up. That's really valuable as well. You throw spinning axes on him and he takes things down. So very strong there, really strong champion. Shen theoretically fails the vanilla test, right? So Shen was 2/6, averages to 4 for 4 with a support buff. Support buff is generally, I would say, also worth like that, one stat point that makes you say, oh, this feels really good. This is a good vanilla card. This is, 7 total, so 3.5 average stats plus a support buff. That's still fine, right? But it means that Shen is a champion you're going to play when you really want barrier synergy, right? So it means like you're going to have Shen support some challenger units, or you're going to have more barrier cards in decks that Shen levels up. This is still a decent enough stat line as long as you're going to play around Shen's level up, because this level up is really, really good, and 3/6 with support for 4 is amazing. So it just puts Shen in a spot where you really care about his level up, and if you do, then he's a good card. And yeah, it was overall a bit too strong. It was like really hard to remove. So now 2/5 is like pretty killable. 2/5 for 4, like you can actually get rid of that. So that's kind of nice. Minor rework to Thresh. I think this is actually a pretty cool change as well. So instead of gaining 1 health when an enemy dies, he just simply has 1 more health straight up. So instead of being a 3/5, it's a 3/6. Now again, vanilla test, 3/6 plus challenger is slightly understated for 5. It's close, it's fine-ish, but it's like if this didn't have a level up text, you wouldn't run this card, right? You wouldn't play a 3/6 challenger for 5. Almost never. It's just really not worth it. There's usually better options. But Thresh can level up, and instead of leveling up when 3 enemies die, it's level up when any 6 units die, which is really good in Shadow Isles. Shadow Isles loves to kill their own units, So this is arguably a buff. The stat change is whatever, but the level up condition is absolutely a buff. Killing your own units is something that you want to do in Shadow Isle, so huge increase in power there. Of course, the Thresh level up is amazing. The first time level 2 Thresh attacks this game, summon an attacking champion from your deck or hand. So like something like Thresh Tryndamere tokens. And what's nice is Freljord has a couple units that they don't mind having die. They have things like the 2 mana 2/1 that draws a card when it dies. I forget what it's called. It's like Avarosan Sentry, I think. You have all the different Death Rattle units, Last Breath units in LOR that are obviously quite good. There's actually further buffs to Last Breath that we'll see in a little bit, but very strong here. So yeah, I mean Thresh is again in the realm of playable. This is one thing for me is like in my mind, I kept thinking like, oh, I've got to level up as soon as possible because if it's like round 7 or round 8 and I finally summon a champion, like why do I care anymore? But I mean, it doesn't matter what round it is. If you pull out a free Tryndamere attacking, that's just absurdly strong. So like this is great. I think he's totally playable. Thresh is one of the champions I've played around the least, but now that you can pretty reliably level him up, I would say again pretty reliably you can do this. This is super powerful. I can see this with Piltover, although Piltover doesn't have all that expensive of champions. But you can, Piltover has a bunch of token stuff as well. You can have Hecarim be your top end, right? You love ephemeral units, so like imagine you play Thresh and you make 3 1/1 spirits and it pulls out a Shark Chariot from the graveyard as well, and that's already 4 units instantly. You trade one thing. You can even do like with Demacia, give them a challenger and knock down 2 units that way. Like there's a lot of really strong combos here, and there's a lot of really expensive champions in Shadow Isles and Freljord and Demacia that really want to get pulled out. So yeah, great card. Super love to see this update as well. The box was pretty crap. The old version of the box basically made an aura in play that gave enemies -1/-0, and it killed things when they were summoned. That was pretty crap. Honestly, it was really hard to use. It was like, I mean, aura effects I don't think are all that well handled, or I would say like visualized in the game. So I don't want to see auras that aren't specifically attached to a unit already, generally speaking, in my opinion. Meanwhile, the new box is awesome, right? And I want to point out it's fast, which means you can see your opponent just like dump cards, just save 4 mana, and then when they swing, you're like, and they're all dead. And it's like a super good combat trick. So unless they have deny, like those things are all taking 3 damage. Really good against kind of weenie decks. Want to point out, right, this is 4 spell mana, so you can play it on round 3. Ionia specifically, if like for some reason mono Ionia gets really popular, their Allegiance unit drags 2 1-drops out of the deck. Every Ionian 1-drop has at most 3 health. So you like instantly counter that card, and they thinned their deck, but you still they have a 3/1 in play that you will just chump block with something and it'll die. So very strong. I think this is super awesome. The fact that Thresh has a better card means you want to play Thresh more often. It's actually probably okay to get like 3 Threshes in your deck. The spell actually helps level up Thresh, which is also awesome. So when your opponent puts their stuff out, you just kill them again. Really cool stuff. Next up is the next champion rework in Calista. And this one, I did like old Calista. I played a lot of her, but I understand this getting changed. So instead of bonding with an ally and it takes damage for her, she bonds with an ally and it gets +2/+0. She also has gained Fearsome. Okay, so Calista is essentially, excuse me, a 3-mana 6/2. She heavily passes the vanilla test. Now, certainly you can kill her, right? She dies to Mystic Shot. It is not hard to find 2 damage. She dies to Avalanche. She dies to a lot of stuff. So she is definitely frail. But you play her on 3. She has 4 attacks. She has something else to attack. It's very common for Shadow Isles to play Cursed Keeper. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that gives you a 4/4 when it dies. Now you have a 2-mana 3/1 that your opponent kind of wants to block because 3 damage around is pretty good, but also doesn't want to block because they don't want to give you the 4/4. Well, that's great. Like, giving your allies an attack buff that your opponents don't want to deal with is very good for you. And you can use it in kind of random situations. Like you can play here's my 3 1/1 ephemerals. Here, let's just give one of them 2 attack and let's swing for the face. If you want to play like Calista Zed for some reason, the 2 attack will go to Zed and his clone. So if you want to do some kind of like Shadow Isles Ionia aggro stuff, again, Calista is 6 attack for 3 mana. That is absurdly strong, and she's fearsome, so chances are, right, like she can't get chump blocked. She's not going to die to Avarosan Sentry or something. She has to get blocked by someone with 3 attack, which means it's at least a 2-drop. And again, as long as you attack in the right order, keep in mind, like, you want to put her linked unit on the left in the attack and put her on the right so that the thing fights first, then she dies. Otherwise, the link drops early. Very, very strong. And you still have level up for Calista, right? Levels up when I've seen 3 allies die, and you can just keep reforging the bond. Again, doesn't take damage for you. You can't have the, infinite health Calista, but it's a 4/2 fearsome. You're probably going to play an ephemeral deck with this, and you just have a lot of attack. Like, this is still a very, very well-statted aggro card. It's no longer the really, intricate control stuff where you just, like, kept her alive and the Undying would just receive damage. You'd bring it back and it would receive damage, but it's a very good aggro card. Next up, Elise just is a spider. Good change. Doesn't count towards her own level up condition. It's other spiders. That's fine. I think her being a spider is a positive. I'm happy about that. Good stuff. Another champion, or I should say character or unit that far surpassed the vanilla test, right? 7/7 plus a keyword for 7. That's very strong as a body. Now, certainly you go into like round 7 or so, and you don't care about pure bodies anymore. You want some actual effects to happen. But in her case, she was a great vanilla unit and readied your attack on summon. That is very, very powerful. That is very, very strong. So now she costs 8. And Tiana's still good. She's still playable. There's a deck that I really like that I never played a lot of, but I think it's very, very strong. And you run things like Tiana Crown Guard, and you also have things like Mist's Call, which is revive an ally that died this round. And when I'm summoned, works on revive effects. So you would like swing with Tiana. You give her Ephemeral if you wanted, who cares? And then revive her, get another attack, and Mist's Call costs 3 mana. And you get a 7/7 back, right? So it's like, well, I readied my attack and got a 7/7 back, and let's swing again. And you would essentially just have like consistently readying your attack, Demacia Shadow Isles, and it was like very, very strong. So I think a deserved nerf here. Still going to find ways to cheat this one out early in some cases. Very, very strong card. More buffs to Demacia. Detain got buffed by 1 mana. I think Detain is very, very strong. It is often hard to remove champions from the game. This will do it. I want to point out that capture, by the way, is if you then kill the capturing unit, the unit gets spit right back out and remains safe. That goes, that's just fine. No problems there. But yeah, it's removal for 5. And it's anything. You can remove absolutely any unit in the game. Champion, minion, you don't care. If it's a champion that levels up by having to see things, it resets it because getting captured is essentially a silence. Then it gets unsilenced when they come back, but this will remove all of Fiora's kills. This will reset Shen back to 0 XP if he's not level 2 yet. Really, really good stuff here. Detain's a very powerful card. I do want to point out that it doesn't cost 6 mana anymore, so it doesn't by itself level up Lux, but you can find ways to spend 1 mana. My nose is very itchy. It's very annoying. Another card rework. This is probably worth doing as well. Honestly, it was pretty hard to say, instead of a random spell, I want Detain. It's like, cool, now your opponent knows what's in your hand. Like, why are you doing this? So now it's Demacia's second silence effect. If you played a spell this round, silence an enemy follower. Right? Remove all text, remove all keywords. So if it's the Undying, it's just a simple 2/2 now. If it's, I do want to point out, by the way, at least in the last preview patch, things like Shark Chariot, once you killed them, even if they were silenced when you killed them, they would get revived anyway. Like, that part of the text would like go away on kill, or like the silence would go away on kill, and they'd get revived regardless. So that was like pretty rough. I don't know if that's working as intended or not. I'm not certain, but keep that in mind. That Shark Chariot can get annoying. But you can silence things like Senna. You can silence any of the really big scary drops. One of the good ones to silence is Heart of the Fluffed. If you play against a Poro deck, that will absolutely massacre Fluffed of Poros. It'll turn into a blank 4/4 with no last breath. Hugely powerful. So yeah, big stuff there. Card looks playable now. Looks very strong. So more Demacia buffs. To go with that, Mobilize getting nerfed. This is certainly very strong. I do want to point out, a lot of players would play spells like this wrong. So you should wait until essentially the end of round 3 to play a card like this. So you bank mana on round 1, you bank mana on round 2, you've now banked 3 spell mana, you go into round 3, which means you got to draw yet another card, then you mobilize with your 3 spell mana, and now you can play a 4-drop on round 3. And everything else in your hand is cheap as well. So Mobilize, this doesn't really change when you can play Mobilize. I guess if you're going to play it on round 2, you could have like mobilized into a 2-drop with the old cost. Now you can't. But I think still a very, very strong card, right? It still helps you cheat out Tiana Crown Guard early, who's incredibly powerful. This is, I think, a hugely good card to play in any sort of unit-heavy aggro deck where you just want to cheat stuff out a little bit early, right? You're playing 70 to 80% units in your deck, and okay, it's round 3, mobilize, play, play, play. Very strong stuff, right? It converts spell mana into regular unit mana, which is very, very powerful. Another card that was definitely, I think, OP is Basilisk Rider in Mono Noxus. Allegiance is if your top deck card is the same faction as the faction I am. So if you're playing Mono Noxus, it was a 4-mana 6/4 Overwhelm, which like is absurdly good for the vanilla test. So instead, it's only a 6/3 Overwhelm, which is still very good. Like a blank 6/3 for 4 is like roughly fine. But being 6/3 Overwhelm for 4 is still very good. So, this is still like, if you're playing Mono Noxus, this is the reason you're playing Mono Noxus. Very good card, very strong, really worth playing. Good stuff here. It's a great aggro card, right? Comes out on 4, has 6 attack, has Overwhelm, so it's going to do something over the top of whatever you're defending. It's going to look really, really good. Meanwhile, Noxus was a bit too defensive. Intimidating Roar, instead of being fast, is slow. It was very easy to stun most boards. Keep in mind the spell was active around round 3. Nothing your opponent summons by round 3 is going to have more than 4 attacks, so it was just like a complete stop to everything. This definitely nerfs, I would say, pretty heavily Yasuo decks, because this was like the obvious synergy is like play a big AoE stun with Yasuo. Now you can't do this mid-combat, so you can't just sort of like sit around and wait and see what happens, and your opponent swings and you just, chump the whole board, basically. They immediately get screwed over. You've got to make the call beforehand. So, if your opponent can swing at the start of round, they can do it before Intimidating Roar comes out. And if they summon big things, it's too late for you. So you've got to kind of make the call of like, okay, when are they going to swing? Okay, I need to do it. And you need to kind of make that call early. Next up, Precious Pet getting, I would argue, nerfed. One thing to point out, though, is it's going to be really hard to block Precious Pet early on. It's hard to find 3 attack for 1 or even 2 mana. The only 1 mana, like, there's like only a couple 3 attack early game units, and one of them can't even block. It's in Noxus, so very easy to get Precious Pet online and have it do some cool stuff. So you'll get some pretty early damage in. This is going to be pretty reliably useful. Old Precious Pet would always hit round 1 if you were on the play, because you would play Precious Pet. Whatever they played would get stunned. You'd swing for 2. It was fine. Now, kind of regardless if you're first or second, you're going to get this in on an early round. Just the question is, do you want to block their 1-drop or not on the way in? Reckoning getting nerfed down to 6 mana. It's still a big AoE board clear. One of the other big Noxus archetypes that I haven't seen people play very much of, at least I didn't see it, was High Power Noxus. 5 Power Noxus is, I think, a really, really cool archetype. I think it's really, really strong. Basilisk Rider, if you miss, still has 5 attacks. That comes online, but I really do like this deck. I think it's really, really fun. It's like a sort of mid-rangey aggro deck where you kind of like get over the top around round 6 or 7, and just your stuff's so big. You have a bunch of card draw, you have a bunch of removal. I think it's a cool deck, so apparently they thought it was too good, so Reckoning drops it down, because it certainly did blow stuff up a lot. She Who Wanders is no longer She Who Wins quite as much. No regen, 10 mana, doesn't kill champions. 3 different nerfs. So it's a 10 mana 10/10 that still destroys a lot of stuff. That's still quite good. I could still easily see Freljord Demacia doing like, finding a way to get like mobilize and play this on 8 and just blow your opponent out. 10/10 will still fight any champion in the game. It'll kill both halves of Tryndamere. Wouldn't have killed Tryndamere anyway, but this can fight Tryndamere, right? Like, this is a very, very strong card. I think it's good to see that, getting nerfed. I know that was like one of the most complained about cards from the first preview patch, so okay, fair enough. Totally reasonable to do that. I was never that partial myself to She Who Wanders. I thought it was like, it was handleable in my opinion, but whatever, that's fine. Who cares? But okay, cool. Good to see that happen. Definitely was frustrating. Balesight, similar nerf. Yep. I mean, that's just She Who Wanders' buff. Still removes, followers from play and in hands. Avalanche no longer hits face. That's kind of a big deal, right? So if you're oftentimes Freljord is one of the control decks. You're often playing ramp as Freljord. So you're trying to get to late game and clear the board enough that you don't die. Not knocking down your own face, fairly useful. not not lethaling yourself, not having tie games was one of the things as well. So I mean, sure, whatever. I didn't care personally much about this, but here it is. It's just board clear now. Um, Talked about Heart of the Fluff being very very strong. It's a 6-drop now. That's fine. Keep in mind that like Heart of the Fluff comes in and it turns into Fluff of Poros and keeps a death rattle or a last breath of when I die, put me back as Heart of the Fluff as a 4/4 plus whatever Poros snacks you have. So it was like very efficient. Like it was a gigantic card that died and then still became a 4/4. So it was like it was sticky. It did a whole lot of stuff. Still very strong. I think Poro decks are still fine. I think Poro deck was, I would argue, the best tribal deck, and it probably still is. But pretty reasonable to see this nerfed. I think it's fine. Wording Stones, I would argue, is nerfed here. It was pretty hard to remove it on round 2. If you had Culling Strike saved up, okay, fine. But now it comes out in round 3. Big thing to point out with this is now this is playable the same round as Catalyst of Eons, which is the other mana buff card in Freljord. So now you can't ramp on 2, you can only ramp on 3. Kind of interesting to note. This also means you essentially gain 2 less mana total from this card. Because it cost 2, now it costs 3, so that's 1 less mana lost, or 1 more mana lost. And above that, it doesn't generate mana on round 3, it can only generate mana on round 4. So essentially, this actually kind of costs you 2 more mana, or at least 2 more spell mana in sort of the medium to long term. So this is pretty meaningful nerf, actually, right? It means that your opponent can summon on 1, summon on 2, swing at you on 3, whether you summon this or not, and you either block this and take some damage or not. But like this is a pretty big hit. This is a pretty big hit to Freljord. This is a pretty important change as well. Again, we talked about the vanilla test, right? 4, 6 plus 2 keywords for 5 was definitely overstated, I would say. So now it's 4, 5 plus 2 keywords is like still pretty peak vanilla. Honestly, it comes in at a pretty good power curve. Like coming in at 5, you're gonna see a lot of things that'll die for 4 attack. Not a lot of things do 5 damage back to you. Big thing to point out is it does get challenged by Garen specifically. So if we are in some kind of weird like mid-range Freljord spam, Garen actually lines up really really well with Scar Maiden Reaver. But yeah, definitely absurdly efficient, right? They even call it expeditions where just vanilla stat lines are really really powerful. I think this is a good change to make. Another change that I really like is Navori Blade Scout. Instead of being a 3/1 and then a 1/1, it's just a 2/1 always, which I think is actually a positive. But still gains elusive the first round. And again, it's when I'm summoned, not when I'm played. So if you play Mono Ionia, you can cheat this out of your deck, and it's elusive the first round. If you drag it back to your hand, play it again, drag it back to your hand, play it again. There's a lot of like hand buff stuff or return to hand stuff in Ionia. That stuff's there too. Still a decent card. This is arguably a buff. It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of times, like you were playing like really aggro elusive decks in Ionia, and swinging in for 3 was really valuable. But there's a chance you could swing in for 2 a second time here, and that would make up for it. It makes it a better block at the very least, because after the first round, it's just a blank 2/1, and a blank 1/1's crappy. A blank 2/1's actually playable. Still a very very good card for its cost. What I think is a pretty big nerf to Sown Seeds. I don't personally see me playing this card. It was certainly part of a bunch of Ionia aggro stuff, where again it would get to round 3, you would drop Sown Seeds, and then bam, play two units with an extra 4 attack on them, combined, whatever else in your hand, going to have that later on as well. It was like very very strong, very aggressive. So now you're going to play this probably still on the beginning of round 3, but it's just kind of less power given. It's probably still okay. It's probably still playable in an elusive aggro deck, but just not as overbearing. Next up was a really really strong build around Karina of Rasa. Instead of being an 8 mana 7/7, it's a 9 mana 6/6. Despite the fact that the text looks different, it's just the text is smaller. It's the exact same wording as far as I can tell. But yeah, playing big spell decks or just playing spell heavy decks using this as like your top end. I've been doing 4 or 5 damage to the entire enemy board. You probably cleared all the units out. You did a lot of damage to the face. This was very, 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 very strong. So it comes in 1 round later, and you can more likely deal with the body. Because keep in mind, anything Karina didn't kill, she would kill with the 7 attack, almost certainly. So really, really powerful stuff there. I didn't play this deck very much. I played it against it a couple times. Definitely a very strong deck. So pretty reasonable nerf. I think that's fine too. Assembly Bot, I knew this was coming. So old Assembly Bot was absolutely degenerate in Limited. It was very, very easy to play old Assembly Bot, right? You just put your 2/2 on the board. You play a 6 mana spell. Now it's a 3/3 plus draw a card. Okay, you play it again, and you had infinite value, and you could almost never be rushed down. It was very reliable and very easy to draft like 3 assembly bots and like 6 mana spells. Do nothing round 1 and 2. Play this on 3. Play Unlicensed Intervention on 4. You win the game. If they don't deny Unlicensed Intervention, you actually just win the game. It was super broken. So good to see this changed. It's now when you play a spell, grant me 1/1. Still solid though. I want to point out that this is the second thing we've now seen that doesn't need 6 mana spells. It just needs spells, right? So, right, Lux can add up over time. You don't have to do it all at once. Assembly bot, you can just do it one at a time. There's a lot of factions that have very cheap spells. Freljord has a lot of burst speed, 1 and 3 mana spells, and 2 with things like Entreat. Piltover has a lot of pretty cheap stuff as well. You can rummage and like just discard some random crap out of your hand. That's a 1 mana burst speed spell. You've got like Mystic Shot for 2. There's a lot of really good ways to buff Assembly Bot. It is not really that hard to get like a 5/5 Assembly Bot for 3, which is okay. That like more than pass the vanilla test. Play that card. And because most spells that you play are going to be fast or burst speed, this gets buffed mid combat. You can just sort of like, hey, so do I have the cards? Do you want to block this? Am I going to get over the top and kill Fiora and survive? Like, there's really good stuff there. So yeah, I think it's a pretty strong card. It's not like a build around, but it's good. Next up, Augmented Experimenter no longer hits face. That's actually kind of nice because so I actually haven't tested this. I don't know if you can play it with no enemy units on board. I actually don't know that answer. I don't know if you can just play it to discard your hand or if you have to find something to target, because you can't target face. So maybe this is a even bigger deal than it looks. I'm just not sure. But certainly was like a cornerstone of playing a Jinx deck. Definitely was quite powerful, but okay, a bit weaker now. Basically, they're removing a lot of face damage, right? Avalanche lost face damage. This lost face damage. Chempunk Shredder is going to lose face damage. One thing I want to point out, just to kind of like think about the stat line of this unit. Obviously, it's like 4/2 for 5 is very weak, but the 1 to everything is pretty strong. This is essentially a blocker, right? Like this is a defensive unit. It deals 1 to enemies, so it gets rid of a lot of chaff. It'll like drop a lot of spiders, and then it'll kill some 4 or 5 health unit that you just pinged for 1 and then dealt 4 to. So for 5 mana, it's pretty good board control, right? It'll deal with medium-sized things well and deals with small-sized things well. So good defender, and if you can get things like Funsmith out where this will do 2 damage instead, it's a lot of power there. But this felt more like, I don't think it was OP, it was just they wanted the consistency of not doing face so much. Eager Apprentice is a huge buff. It's a huge buff. So, 2 mana refill 2 mana versus 3 mana refill 3 mana, you'd think is pretty similar. But the big difference is in the actual application of playing the game. So if you missed on 1 and missed on 2, you go in around 3 and you already have 3 spell mana, which means this card is a 3 mana 2/2, which is really, really bad. With here, though, if you miss on 1 and play this on 2, it's a 0 mana 2/1, right? You spend 2 real mana to summon it, but it gives you 2 spell mana, which means now you're banking 3 spell mana. So you're round 2 with a 2/1 and 3 spell mana. So you go into round 3, you've got 3 regular and 3 spell mana. So you can play like an Unlicensed Invention on 3 and get a 5/5 while still getting a 2/1 early on the board to contest stuff. Hugely powerful. This is definitely a huge power up. This is really, really valuable. You still have to want a 2/1, but a 2/1 is a pretty good blocker. It's a card that gets on the board round 2, so you can battle something, deal with some of the enemy units that get summoned out. Yeah, really good stuff. And my nose is just continually itchy. It won't go away. Flame Chomper is nerfed down to 1 HP. RIP. I really liked playing discard decks. I guess this was slightly too strong. You could force a challenge several times. Now it only happens the once. Whatever. It's not a huge deal. This will certainly die to more AoEs now. It'll drop to Avalanche. It'll drop to Withering Wail. It'll drop to Chempunk Shredder, things like that. It's kind of whatever. This is obviously a moderate power down, but we're seeing a lot of nerfs to what is essentially the Piltover's on plus Noxus aggro discard deck. Lost a lot of power here. Right, we got a lot less face damage. Flame Tremors got weaker. Draven got weaker. Certainly a weaker deck. Flash of Brilliance getting another rework. So again, this is another card that's going away from the 6 mana identity, because the 6 mana identity is kind of going away, which is fine. Right, we had Assembly Bot's up there, was another 6 mana identity card. Flash of Brilliance, instead of refill your spell mana, make a 6 mana spell, it's refill your spell mana, make a random spell. So this means this costs 0. This always costs 0 mana. As long as you have 3 to spend, you spend 3, then add 3 back into the hand, or into the mana pool. It's spell mana only. So if you were converting regular mana into spell mana, okay, that's kind of a negative for you. But this basically just allows you to spend 3 mana doing nothing. It's burst speed, so you can cast it mid-combat and know what you have available to yourself. You can do it as like priority passing. So if you really want to get your opponent to like, if you want to bait your opponent into playing some cards, on your round, you can just play Flash of Brilliance and pass. You didn't really lose any mana. You just converted a thing. If your opponent hard passes, you can end the round right away, or figure out what's going on, get your opponent to put more mana out of their hand. There's some value here, but this is useful for leveling up Lux, right? Like if you have 2 of these in your hand, you play Lux, and as long as you like think about it, right? On round 6, bank 3 spell mana, play Lux, play 2 Flash of Brilliance. It refunds the mana. You have two new spells in your hand. You still have 3 spell mana. Lux is now level 2. So now you go to the next round. You just play those 2 spells that you created, because you're gonna have 6 mana worth of spells almost definitely, and now you've got a Final Spark in your hand. It's like super reliable. So Flash of Brilliance is really here to be a combo piece, and it's really good for Heimerdinger. It's really good for level 2 Ezreal. It's really good for Lux. It's really good for Assembly Bot. It's really good in a Karina of Rasa deck in the first place. Like, this is super powerful. This is a really good card now, and if you're gonna play a spell combo deck, this is an auto include. Rising Spellforce no longer attacks no longer attacks enemies. And they are doing a consistency thing where they really want to make buff cards not affect enemies. I mean, there were cases where, like, once in a while you could see, like, theoretically, I'm going to challenge you with the Undying, and I want to buff you to have some attacks that you can kill the Undying, because it wasn't going to do it otherwise. It's like, yeah, it exists. I don't know. It's whatever. Like, I don't really care. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Absorb Soul. So this is another set of changes. They're removing the ally kill stuff from burst to fast. Basically meaning you can't summon a Cursed Keeper into an Abomination, Escape the Abomination, at burst speed, which, honestly is probably a good thing. Here's a story from early development, sometime earlier this year or last year or whatever, I forget exactly. Fresh Offerings, which is the 3 mana summon Vialmaw, used to be burst speed. So I would board clear, my opponent would summon 18 power worth of units at burst speed and then just swing at me. It was silly. So they made Vialmaw slow, which is the right choice, and now they're making Absorb Soul as well as Glimpse Beyond go into fast speed. Now, this is some interesting things. This does 2 interesting things. So one is, no longer being burst is a pretty big deal, because you can't, like, infinite combo with level 2 Ezreal in to win the game. It means you can't get Escaped Abomination in the middle of combat. It won't resolve fast enough. But what it does do is allows you to chump block and get value out of this card. So it lets you, see your opponent swing with their 4/4 or whatever. You can drag your, I don't know, let's say Avaros and Sentry into the block, and then put Glimpse Beyond the top of it, and then lock in. And the block will lock in, Glimpse will pull the unit out, and you're fine. The chump block happens, and you get the Glimpse Beyond card draw. So there's power up and power down for this. Worth noting. Grasp the Undying can now target allies. Yep, same reasons, right? Kill Cursed Keeper. Kill Avaros and Sentry. Kill the Undying. Yep, makes total sense. Worth doing. We had the box updated from before. Again, I think it's a pretty strong effect. Again, this is only worth it in a situation where your opponent summons at least 2 units in a round, right? 3 damage for 4 mana is not great. This screws Heimer decks really hard. Your opponent summons other Heimer turrets, and you're like, nah. They just all die instantly. If your opponent gets a lot of tokens out, you just kill them off right away. So this can be really powerful. This will kill, a Zed Shadow. This will kill Shark Chariots. This will kill any of that, any kind of Hecarim stuff, because all those ephemeral units come out. You just completely board clear, and you just have the Hecarim left. Very, I think, strong card. It's somewhat situational, but very strong in the situations. Another rework I really care about. This is a very good change. Old Warden's Prey was complete crap. This was a horrible card. This is actually the second version of the card I've seen. There is a development version where its last breath would make a fleeting drain 1 spell in your hand that cost 2, I think. Maybe it cost 0. I think it cost 2. So then they're like, okay, well, let's have it just instantly ping face. And now it's actually something good again, and it's create another Last Breath follower from any region that costs 3 or less. So this is now going to be really cool stuff, right? This can make you, again, Avaros and Sentry. This can make you Undying. This can make Cursed Keeper for you. This can make a lot of stuff out there. I'm pretty sure... I think every Last Breath is positive. I can't think of any units right now that have negative Last Breaths in the game right now, so this is generally going to be a positive for you. Again, it creates it in hand, but this is essentially a 1-mana card that is not card draw. You don't thin your deck, but I mean, it's really valuable. You get on board, and you're going to get something back for it that's going to be playable. So very, very, very strong card. Withering Wail no longer heals for everything it hits. This is a consistency up, but generally I would say a nerf overall. You can't heal for 6. You only ever heal for 3. It means if you're really desperate, you can hit nothing and heal for 3, so that's kind of cute. That was unlikely to really happen, but whatever. Yeah, it ultimately makes it less of a blowout against really wide boards. Okay, sure, whatever. Brood Awakening nerfed by 1 mana. So, 6 mana for your 3/2/1 Spiderlings, and the 1/0 to everything else. Definitely Brood Awakening was on the strong side. I don't know if it needed to be nerfed, but it was definitely one of the stronger cards, so I think that's fine. But, fair enough. And then they have the watch list. So Fiora, very powerful, but being watched. Keep in mind that not a lot in Demacia really changed, right? We look up to the Demacia card changes, and they nerfed Mobilize. They actually buffed this card. They buffed Detain. They nerfed Tiana. So I mean, it's fine. They didn't really change Demacia very much. They did nerf Shen though, right? One of the big things is they nerfed Shen. So that I think does a lot for that. Is that Shen is easier to kill, and he's going to be less supportive towards her. That's going to be a fairly big deal, I think. And they really enjoyed that she's super unique, which I agree with. Anivia is one of my favorite champions. I think the first deck I ever really made and played a bunch of games in a row on was an ephemeral Anivia deck. It was playing something Islanders. You make Anivia ephemeral. You bring out Calista. You have Anivia take all the damage for you. You try to find ways to cheat a second or third copy out of it. With the 3 mana, make a 1/1 ephemeral copy. Like making Anivia copies is super fun, super awesome, really really enjoyable deck archetype. And I'm glad it's staying for now. Deny is another very powerful one that I think is certainly pretty strong. People were playing a lot of heavy ramp and using Deny to survive the mid game or get rid of things like Vengeance that were removing the bombs. A lot of the end game stuff that was getting played in Ionia Freljord got nerfed. Freljord ramp got nerfed. She Who Wanders got nerfed. And so for now they're keeping Deny. Again, Deny was really best served when it got rid of big spells, because if you trade Deny for Mystic Shot, it's like, well, whatever, right? Like that could have been Elixir of Iron and we would have been fine here. Pretty reasonable stuff. We'll see. I could totally see them nerfing Deny somewhere down the line and making it 4 mana or something, but I think you can play around Deny. I have some deck ideas that I think can totally handle Deny, so when eventually they launch out ranked, I'm going to spam some ranked games, and I honestly am not going to be worried about Ionia decks, I don't think. They've upgraded some various stuff. So Vlad level ups look better. Karina Veraza's visuals are cooler. Heimerdinger's text looks better. Katarina text looks better. Vladimir's text looks better. The chevrons that are the Helmet Bro icon, having played this patch some in bug testing, looks way better. Really, really, really like this one. Really like this one as well, where offensive keywords won't show up. I mean, the icon that the keyword exists still shows up on the card, but the actual hemming around the card art to show the overwhelm damage, the quick attack stuff, that won't be unless you have an attack token, which I think is really, really smart. That's a cool change there as well. It's actually interesting. There's been several changes in this patch where things that, I'm not saying it's because of me, but were things that I had suggested during development that either they didn't have time or I'm dumb or whatever, who knows, but it's cool to see a lot of these have now come in. The changing card art I had suggested before, I was not alone in this, but the assembly bot rework, I was like, I don't think this card's gonna ever be balanceable and limited. Turns out it wasn't. But it's cool to see things that I wanted are in. That's always fun. Even if I was just one straw on the hay pile, that's cool. This is actually another interesting thing. Clicking on another player's deck in game shows what champions were included in the deck not only just the regions. This is actually a pretty big deal. I am okay with this. I know there can be some concern of like, wow, why are you giving away my deck? But I think it's honestly fine. End of the day, like, there's a lot of competitive formats where you know each other's decks coming in. Sometimes to the card, sometimes to at least like a general archetype. In other competitive card games, so this is not like world first. They're map hacking the deck. But it lets you come into the game on the mulligan and say, okay, I'm against, Piltover, Zon, Freljord. I wonder what kind of deck that is. And then you're like, well, I can see the champions they're running, so okay, I probably know what deck it is. I think that's fine, right? I think coming into the game where it's like, okay, we both know roughly what deck we're each playing. Let's go. It's just a different skill test than can I guess what deck they're playing. So I don't really mind this. I think it's fine. It certainly can have an impact, but it's not that huge. Like, once in a while you'll mulligan differently because of that, but not super massive. So, a whole bunch of paragraphs on that. Deck builder looks slightly different and shows off your cards a bit differently when you're trying to craft them. They're essentially buffing these decks. Shiraza the Blade's pretty hard to use without synergy. She's a 5 mana 3/3 that deals double to the Nexus, so you have to really tailor around getting her to hit face. That can be hard sometimes. Captain Finish is a much more reliable end game. I think it turns your entire hand into 5 mana, deal 4 to the Nexus, which is just that's the finisher. Pretty solid card overall. Can certainly be Karma synergied as well if you needed to. And yeah, adding generically good minions here and adding some removal. Intrepid Mariner is fairly hard to use as a base level because it's a support that gives something else elusive, so that not always greatly useful for a starter deck. Yeah, simplifying is a good thing. So yeah, overall really cool stuff. AI slightly better, bunch of bug fixes. Pretty much covers it. No TLDR. I think it's actually pretty hard to TLDR card game changes, I would say. So let me know how you feel about this video, this format. They're not usually going to be this long because they said they're not usually going to have patches this long. But the preview patch comes out something around 7 or 8 a.m. Thursday morning Pacific time. So within 8 hours of this upload, the preview patch is live. I'm going to be streaming every ounce of free time I get. Really looking forward to this. Really enjoy this game. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.